All right. I'm going to give everyone just a moment to get logged in. Thank you all so much for joining us today. I'm going to wait just a couple of moments. I know we've got a couple more people who are going to be logging in today. So as you come on in, I just want to thank you again for taking the time this morning to meet with us. Today, we're going to be talking about work authorization, information for academic advisors. Of course, this session is advertised for academic advisors, but it can be useful for any University of Minnesota staff member. So again, I really do appreciate you taking the time out of your day to attend this session. Today's session is being recorded and will be sent to you after we conclude today's meeting. So please, if you have colleagues who are not able to be present today, feel free to share that with them. And we'll be finding a space where this can exist on our website as well. All right. I think we've got just about everyone who's going to be joining us today. So with that, let's go ahead and get started. Hello, everyone. Again, thank you. This is the Work Authorization Crash Course for academic advisors and the larger University of Minnesota staff community, really anyone who is working with our international student population. We're going to start with some introductions. So my name is Emily Guse, and I have a split role here on campus. I am an academic and career coach, as well as F1 advisor or international student advisor over with the International Student and Scholar Services Office here at the U. I'm also joined by my colleague, Eric Kroetsch. He is a senior international counselor, and he is going to be in the question and answer portion today. He'll be helping you all out with any questions that you have during the presentation or helping you to ask the questions at the end. So a couple of quick things about the question and answer. You have the question and answer available to you throughout the entire presentation. So please, as you have questions, go ahead and put them in that question and answer section. So that way we can either answer them by typing or we can save it to answer live at the end of today's presentation. All right, before we dive in, we've started off with some introductions, but I want to get a little bit of introductions from you all. So there is a poll that has just launched. Tell me a little bit about where you're coming from today. Which college here at the U are you representing? Awesome. Looks like we've got pretty good representation all across the board. We've got a couple in CETAs, a couple in Carlson, got some CLA, CHD, CSE. Awesome. All right. So I'm going to go ahead and end the poll. And yes, as you can see, we've got a good amount of representation across different colleges here today. Okay. So with that, let's go ahead and get started on today's content. So, a little bit of an overview. Again, like I said, this is geared towards academic advisors, but the information can be useful to all University of Minnesota staff members. So again, even if you're not an academic advisor, I'm really glad that you're here because the information can be useful to you as well. What are we going to be discussing today? Really, there are two main goals for today's workshop. The first goal is to view the application process for work authorization from the student's perspective. The second is understand the role of an academic advisor in this process. I want to point out with the first goal is that I use the word view very intentionally. This really is just to give you context for what students do when they go about applying for work authorization. I'm not expecting you to walk away from today's presentation knowing step by step by step what an international student has to do to apply for work authorization. That's for us at ISSS. This part of, or this goal is really just to give you the context to know what it is that students are doing when they apply for work authorization. And the main thing that I want you walking away with today is knowing what is the role of an academic advisor in the request process for an international student to gain work authorization. So a little overview of what we're going to discuss today. We're going to situate ourselves to start off with a little bit of vocabulary. We'll talk about the difference between on-campus work and off-campus work. We'll get into the application process for CPT and OPT. Again, just to give you a little bit of context around both of those. We'll talk about the student's role in this process. We'll talk about ISSS's role in this process, and we'll talk about the academic advisor's role in the process. Or if you are not an academic advisor and a general university staff member, at least give you an idea of what academic advisors do and if you would like to help them in that process. Finally, we'll end with a little bit of time for question and answer, and we'll have some ideas for how to keep the conversation going. Really, how to get more information about working with international students, as well as how to connect with ISSS for any questions that you may have. What I really want to emphasize throughout this entire presentation today is that ISSS is here for you. We are here to answer any of the questions that you have around work authorization. And again, the goal of today's presentation is to help you understand the role of an academic advisor. And again, just give you the context for what students go through when they apply for work authorization. With that, let's go ahead and dive into some vocabulary. So, four important things that I just want to use to situate us in today's conversation. The first is non immigrant visa. This means that an individual who is applying for a non immigrant visa has connections or ties to their home country and will intend to return once they have ended their visa. Our students are here on either an F1 visa or a J1 visa, and these are student visas. These student visas are non immigrant visas, meaning that students still have ties to their home country and will return once they've concluded their time here in the US. Now, there are two main types of visas that we have here for student visas. The first being F1 visa. That is going to be the majority of our students here at the U. And we do have some students who are here on J1 visas. Because the majority of the students that we work with are here on F1 visas, a lot of today's conversation is going to center around work authorization for students with F1 visas, but I'll also share with you how to get more information if you would like it on J1 visa work authorization. Now, what actually is work authorization? Work authorization is really what a student needs to be eligible to legally work off campus or be eligible to legally work here in the US. So, a student needs to apply or request work authorization, and we'll go through that whole procedure. But know that that is the whole idea around this is that students need to have work authorization to be eligible to work. And then finally, there is one document that is really big in the international student world, and that is called their I-20. I should clarify, this is for F1 students. And our F1 students have a document that's really important because it contains their academic information as well as their work authorization information. It's called their I-20. Now, I'm going to show you the I-20, but again, this is just to give you context. My goal is not that you are walking away thinking that you need to know everything about the I-20. That's the role for us here at ISSS. This is, again, just to give you context. So this is an example of what an I-20 might look like. It has some basic information about the student, it's got some biographical information, it's got some information about the school that they're attending, and it includes some important information like their education level, the major that they're doing or the degree that they're doing, as well as their program duration. It'll have a start date as well as an end date for their academic program. On page 2 of the I-20 is where the student is going to have their work authorization information. Again, a student will request work authorization from ISSS, and then we put that onto their I-20. So again, this is just an example to give you a little bit of context for what do students actually look for when they're seeking out work authorization. All right, now let's talk a little bit about on-campus work versus off-campus work. So on-campus work is going to be any work where the paycheck or compensation for the position comes from the University of Minnesota. This is limited to 20 hours per week during the fall and spring semesters, and students are able to work more during school breaks, that typically being summer break as well as winter break. And finally, students can work really any job on campus, again, as long as it is on campus. It doesn't have to have a direct relation to the degree that they are receiving, as long as it's on campus. Now, on the flip side, off campus is defined as anything where the paycheck, or compensation does not come from the University of Minnesota. In order to be eligible for this, students have to have been in the US for at least one academic year or two consecutive semesters. And in order to work off campus, students do need to have a job that is related to the major that they are working on or the degree that they are working on. Again, they are here on a student visa, and the benefit or off campus is a benefit of their work, or sorry, of their student visa. So the work that they do off campus does need to be related to their studies or to their major or their degree. We'll get into the amount of time, but it's very similar. During this fall and spring semester, 20 hours per week, can be more during school breaks. All right, let's move on to another poll. So I've started already talking a lot about different things around work authorization. So oops, I got to go back to the other one. I'm going to share this next poll. I've got two questions for you. The first is, has a student already approached you about jobs or internships this academic year? And have you heard the acronyms CPT or OPT before? So I'll give you a moment or two just to answer. Looks like we've got a couple of people. Looks like most people have at least heard of CPT, OPT, but if you haven't, I'm so glad that you're here. We're going to be able to talk more about that. Additionally, has a student approached you about jobs or internships this academic year? Looks like a good majority of us have been approached about this so far. I'm going to go ahead and end that poll. I'm going to share the results. And yes, so like I said, many people have already been approached this academic year by students about jobs or internships, as well as a good number of you have heard of CPT and OPT before. But today, we're really going to outline what they are and when students use them. All right, thank you so much. I'm going to stop sharing these results and we're going to head back. Okay, so we're going to be talking a lot today about off campus work authorization. CPT and OPT are both for off campus work. Now, off campus work, again, is payment or compensation that does not come from the University of Minnesota. All the work that students do needs to be related to the degree that they are working on. Students need to have the work authorization prior to actually starting the work. And this is, again, a benefit of their student visa, meaning that it is eligible to those who have maintained their visa status. Now, work authorization is required for both full-time work and part-time work off campus. You might have a student who's going to be working off campus part-time during the semester, and then they'll work full-time during like summer break. It's important to know that students do need to have work authorization for both part-time and full-time work off campus. And then again, I just really want to emphasize that ISSS is here for, of course, students, but we are also here for you. If you have questions, please connect with us. We would love to either meet with you, communicate with you by email. We really want to be able to help you with any questions that you have around this. And again, I really want to clarify that ISSS is here because we are the ones who are the experts in this. So please do not feel that you need to be an expert in anything around determining what is on campus versus off campus, whether or not something needs CPT. Direct students to us. We're happy to answer those questions, as well as if you have questions, we're happy to work with you. All right, so a couple of you, or it sounds like the majority of you have at least heard of the acronyms CPT and OPT. So CPT is curricular practical training. We'll start with talking about that. And then OPT is optional practical training. That'll be the second topic of conversation. But let's start with CPT, or curricular practical training. I'm going to be referring to it as CPT for the rest of the presentation today, but please know it is curricular practical training. So when do students use CPT? This is the type of work authorization that students need in order to be able to work off campus before graduation. So this is going to apply if a student is applying for an internship off campus, if they're going to be doing really any kind of work off campus, a student needs to apply for CPT, or they need to request CPT. When students request CPT, it is curricular practical training. And that comes with a credit requirement. So students need to be enrolled in at least one credit that relates to their employment. We'll go over what that looks like in a couple of slides, but please know that for CPT, students in the majority of cases do need to be enrolled in a course that is directly related to their employment. Again, there are time limits to this, so students are limited to 20 hours per week during fall and spring semesters, but they, of course, can request full time over breaks. That can be summer break or winter break. One thing I really want to clarify with that 20 hours per week limit is that that's between all jobs. So let's say a student's already working 10 hours per week on campus, then they would be limited to 10 hours per week off campus that they would be allowed to do. So again, that's for the student and ISSS to know, but it's just helpful context for you to know as well that students are limited to 20 hours per week total of employment during fall and spring semester. So, just to provide you some context, we're going to walk through what is the actual CPT request process. What do students actually do when they apply for CPT? The first thing that a student needs in order to be able to apply for CPT is a job offer. Students are not able to apply for CPT until they have received an actual job offer. That job offer will include things like start date, description of the employment, end date, and other information that's really important for the student. But it's very important to know the very first step is to get a job offer. Now, the next part is where you, the academic advisor, come in. We have students, when they receive a job offer and are getting ready to apply for CPT, we request that students meet with their academic advisor. Again, this is for three reasons. The first is that students have a credit requirement for CPT. So, students are going to be connecting with you to determine if they are already enrolled in internship class. We'll go over classes for CPT in a couple of slides, but they're going to discuss with you the course that they need to enroll in. They're going to discuss with you the relatedness of their job opportunity to their major. Now, some of you might be departmental or some of you might be major specific advisors and can easily help your students with this. Others might not be as deeply connected to the content of what you're advising on. So I encourage you, if you have a student who wants to work with you on the relatedness of a job offer to their major and you're just not really sure, have them connect with a faculty member or have them connect with someone who is maybe a little more field specific in your department. So that way the student can review how related that degree, or sorry, how related that job is to the degree or the major that they are working on. And then finally, students also need to determine whether or not their CPT is elective, required, or co op. Now, most of our students will be applying for elective CPT. This means that it's not a requirement to graduate. They can still graduate even without this work opportunity. But if you are part of a program or if your student is part of a program where they are not able to graduate without this internship, work experience, etc., then they would be applying for required CPT. Or if you are working with engineering students and they are working on a co op, they're going to do this all through the co op program, but we also have co op CPT as well. So, again, the second step in a student's process for applying for CPT is to determine the course that they either are already enrolled in or need to enroll in. Second is determining the relatedness to major. And then finally is determining which type of CPT they're going to be using. The vast majority of our students will be using elective CPT. Then once they've met with you, then they're going to request CPT through my ISSS. They submit that request to us, and we take about 10 business days or 2 weeks, depending on if there are holidays in there, to actually process the request. So they send their request through my ISS, and then we create a new I-20 for them that includes all of their CPT information on it. And then once that start date arrives for CPT, as long as it's on their I-20, they are good to start working. Again, I show you the process just to contextualize where the academic advisor meeting happens in the process, as well as, again, just to show you what it is that a student goes through when they apply for CPT. Okay, so we've talked a little bit about course, but I want to take some time to quickly dive on a little bit further into course information for CPT. The first thing is that when ISSS is processing a student's CPT request, we have to verify that the student is in fact registered for the course. So where we see this potentially being an issue, or not an issue, but where students might get confused is they get a summer internship and they know that they're going to enroll in a course, but they can't yet enroll in it. We can't actually approve their CPT until they've actually been able to register for the course and we can see their course in their enrollment. Um, so the first thing is that ISS needs to verify that the student is in fact registered for the course. Second is that the student is going to need to enroll in at least one credit that requires employment. At the undergraduate level, this often looks like an internship course. I know some schools have a specific CPT course. And then at the graduate level, occasionally this can also look like a directed studies course or an independent studies course. But again, it should be at least one credit that requires employment. Third is that there is an instructor verification form that needs to be assigned by the instructor. The reason for this is because the grade that the student receives in that class shouldn't actually be graded, or I should say the final credit should not be graded until the student has concluded their employment. So if a student is enrolling in a spring class, but their internship won't end until the end of summer, let's call it August 15th, then that class should not be graded until August 15th once they have concluded their employment. And then one thing I want to touch on is that students need a credit for each new CPT, unless they're extending for 30 days or less. But it might come up in a situation where a student has enrolled in an internship course for spring and they've been doing a spring internship and then they get a summer internship. Very exciting. In this case, because they've already started a CPT with this credit, they do need an additional credit to be able to take the new CPT. Um, so that's just one thing to keep in mind is that the student does need a new credit every time that they use a new CPT, unless they're extending their current CPT for 30 days or less. Okay, I would love to answer any more questions that you have around courses, so please feel free to put those in the chat. Or again, we here at ISS are here to help you with any questions that you have. So if you have questions about courses or anything around CPT, please connect with ISS. We would love to be able to work with you on determining which course, or sorry, determining how a student can enroll in a course or any other questions that you might have. One thing I want to note on that third bullet point, again, is the course instructor verification form. Just to quickly show you what that looks like, here is what the course instructor verification form is. It includes the student's name, the position that they're doing, the employer that they're going to be working for, the number of credits that they're going to be doing, and what semester it's happening, as well as what is the actual course name, both designator and number. And then finally, how long will the student be employed for? Like I said before, the students can't actually be graded for the course until they have concluded their employment. So it's really important that this form be filled out just so that way that we know that the instructor has agreed to not grade the course until the actual employment has concluded. Signatures, and then the student uses that form to then submit to us at ISSS while we process their CPT. All right. So just a quick review of everything CPT. Again, students use this before graduation. Students need a job offer first. They need to enroll in a credit, and that's every time that they request CPT. And this is needed for both part-time and full-time work off campus. All right. I'm going to take a pause because it looks like there is a question around CPT. So, Eric, would you like to go ahead and ask the question?
Yes, so we have a question regarding both CPT and OPT, and the question is the following. Is the CPT and OPT process different for graduate students versus undergraduate students?
Good question. So, For graduate students and undergraduate students, they're going to apply it the same way. They need to determine if it's elective, required, or co op. They need to meet with their academic advisor or their departmental advisor to determine what course they're going to enroll in, as well as they need to get the course instructor verification form. The difference that I know of is really going to be that course. At the undergraduate level, that's largely going to be internship courses, or I know, again, some colleges do have CPT specific courses. At the graduate level, there I have seen where it's been independent studies or directed studies. So the biggest difference that I know of when it comes to graduate students versus undergraduate students is really the course that they are going to be using for CPT. Um, yeah, Eric, anything to add to that question?
Emily, two things come to mind for me, and the first is that the academic advisor typically for graduate students, certainly not in all cases, but oftentimes it's going to be a professor versus for undergraduates, it's bound to be probably a college advisor, maybe sometimes a major advisor. And then the other thing is that undergraduates almost certainly will not be eligible for full-time CPT. They'll only be eligible for full-time CPT during semester breaks, as you've indicated. Whereas graduate students who are in uh, Plan A or Plan B masters or doctoral student, and the student has completed all of required coursework for their degree, those students would be eligible for full-time CPT during fall or spring semesters. So just a couple of differences there.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. Um, I think I'm going to go ahead and ask the next question that I see in here too. So, question on the discussion of relatedness to major. So, many careers, jobs, etc., accept any major. So, can you say when CPT is not related to a major? So, if I'm interpreting this question correctly, I think it's that really when you like look at a job posting, a lot of them will say we take any major. Um, One thing that's really important, and again, it is on the student ultimately to make the final decision, but it's important to know that the when a student is using CPT, or as we'll get into in a moment, OPT, that the work that the student is doing needs to be directly related to the major. So even if a job offer says that, we take any sort of major, we take any sort of field. Unfortunately, that doesn't work for international students or international students, again, who are here on an F1 visa, because the work that they do needs to be directly related to the degree that they received. Um, so I hope that that answers the question, but please, if that was not quite the question, let me know. You can either put that in the chat or raise a new question, and I'll be happy to answer in the next section. So thank you so much for asking. Um, the issues on the edge of relatedness where a question might be raised. Yes. So I guess another thing when thinking about relatedness um, of a job to a job to the major that the student is receiving. One tool that I know has been used in the past is having a list of items that what are the learning outcomes of a certain major? What are the classes? What are the skills that are all learned within a specific major? And then looking at the job description and trying to draw connections between them. If it's a struggle to make those connections, and again, this is for the student ultimately to determine, but again, if it's really a struggle to make those connections, it might not be a good relatedness to major. So if you have questions about this, or if you have a student who has questions about this, feel free to connect them with us. While ISSS, we work with all of the different colleges and all of the different majors, programs, all of that. We can't really be the content expert in all of these, but we're happy if a student is like, I just want to run this by you. We're always happy to meet with students. So I hope that that answered the question. If it did not, please do let me know in the chat. All right, let's start diving into OPT. This one's a little bit quicker. So OPT, or optional practical training, is what students are going to use after graduation. Now they're going to, in hopefully be applying before they graduate. But again, this is the type of work authorization that students need to be eligible to work here in the US after they graduate from their program. Students who apply for OPT are granted 12 months of work authorization. We'll get into STEM OPT in a bit. But all students, regardless of degree, who have maintained their visa status are eligible to apply for 12 months of work authorization. Again, similar to CPT, in a job that is related to their degree. Now, just like before, I'm going to show you the process just so you have an idea of what it is that students are doing when they apply for OPT. The first is to request an I-20 from ISSS. We do include academic advisor here as well. We'll get into in about like 10 slides what your role is in this, but please know that you are also going to be part of this process as well, largely to confirm that yes, the student is graduating and a couple of other pieces of information as well. But the very first step for students is to request a new I-20 from ISSS. And like I said, we then put the OPT onto their I-20. Then the student takes that I-20 and they're going to gather a bunch of other materials as well. I'm not going to list those out here, but if you would like to know more, we do have that on our website. But students, after they receive the I-20, gather a bunch of materials, and then they use those materials to apply through USCIS. That is going to be the second, like, huge step of the application because students actually need to request OPT through USCIS. And this part takes a while. This part can take I I have 2 to 4 months here, but depending on the student case, it can take less, it can take more. USCIS right now is processing applications in, I should say, they're advertising that they process applications in 3.5 months. So we are reaching out to students every semester to encourage them to apply as early as they are able to. So that way they definitely have their work authorization by the time that they would like to start working. But they apply through USCIS. And then for OPT, students have a second document that's very important, and that's called their EAD card. Again, this is not something that you need to know. It's just helpful context for you to be aware of if a student is talking to you about OPT. So a student applies through USCIS, and then USCIS is going to issue them what's called an EAD card or an employment authorization document card. It's a mouthful, but students need to wait for this card in order to be eligible to start working on OPT. And again, this is the part that takes a long time. Um, if you have a student who's really concerned about that timeline, connect them with us at ISSS. We would love to be able to chat with them about options that they have. So please, if you have a student who is very concerned about that timeline, connect them with us and we can chat with them about options. So again, this is just context, but I think it's helpful context because we are officially kind of in the OPT application season, meaning that you're probably going to start getting requests from students. Students are eligible to apply for OPT 90 days before their program completion date. So for students who are graduating on May 8th this year, that's going to be our undergraduate students, as well as anyone who is a Plan C master's student. Their graduation date or their degree completion date is May 8th, and 90 days before that happened just a couple of days ago. It was February 8th. So that means that the window is officially open to be eligible to apply for OPT. Now, of course, we've worked with students who maybe are not, maybe they have a couple of reasons why they're waiting to apply. The latest that a student can apply is 60 days after their program completion date. So that's going to be July 7th. So it's a big window that students have to apply for OPT. But again, because USCIS takes a very long time to process applications, we encourage students to apply earlier. One thing to clarify here is that for OPT, and I'm going to go back to this first step, there is not a requirement that a student has a job offer in order to apply. So beyond processing time, that's another big difference between CPT and OPT. For OPT, there is no job offer that you need in order to apply. Again, that's because USDAS takes so long to process applications that we actually have, I would say most students are applying well before they've received a job offer. And again, that's just so that way they can have a little bit of that safety net to make sure that they have their card, their both their I-20 and EAD card in the time by the time that they would like to start working. Okay. I saw that we had a couple of questions. Eric, anything that we should bring to the group?
Just questions similar to what you just answered about whether a job offer is needed to apply for OPT. And I
Perfect.
indicated, no, it's not.
Awesome. Yes. And that's the, I mean, I'm going to call it good news. The good news is that no, students do not need to have a job offer. But like I said, if you have a student who has a job offer and hasn't yet applied for OPT, send them to us and we would love to talk with them about options that they have. All right. So some of you might be aware of STEM OPT. And I should say it's not just STEM OPT, but it's STEM OPT extension. So for qualifying STEM degrees, a student must have a qualifying STEM degree to be eligible for this. But if they do have a qualifying STEM degree, students can apply for what's called STEM OPT extension, which then allows them an additional 24 months of work authorization for a total of 36 months, which is really awesome. So, in order for students to be eligible to apply, they need to already be on their OPT and they need to be employed when they are applying. The good news is that for academic advisors, you do not have a part in this application. Students are not submitting anything to you. But again, just helpful context for you to have around STEM OPT. Now, I have received a couple of questions before from academic advisors around, especially at the undergraduate level, around which degrees are STEM degrees. Because the confusing part is that STEM OPT is not just any STEM degree, it's a specific list of STEM degrees. And that's determined by what's called a CIP code or a classification of instructional program. This is issued by the US Department of Education, and DHS, or Department of Homeland Security, creates a list of degrees that qualify for STEM OPT. So students will know by looking again at their I-20 to determine whether or not their degree is a STEM eligible degree. I want to emphasize that students should work with ISSS if they have questions around that. The reason for that is that CIP codes are not exclusively used for STEM eligibility. They have a variety of other purposes as well, and they can occasionally change year to year. So I would have you connect a student with ISSS to determine whether or not their current major is STEM eligible, or if they're considering a major, again, connect them with ISSS, and we would love to be able to let them know. Um, but we can't it's difficult to come up with like a comprehensive list of majors that count, again because there are moving parts both on DHS as well as CIP codes. So if you have questions around whether or not a specific degree is eligible for STEM OPT, connect with us and we would love to let you know. We'd be happy to have that conversation with either you or directly with the student as well. So that is STEM OPT. Any questions at all about STEM OPT?
Emily, we do have a question. Can you see it in the question and answer area there?
Yeah. So the advisor stating the APAS question.
Yes, exactly.
All right. So, just to contextualize this for everyone, we have a question in the chat. The wording advisor states if a student may be graduating is not clear. Should we say yes if a pass says that they will be complete as long as they pass their current courses or even on probation and have had a rough term? So, I would say as long as and Eric, please feel free to chime in if you've got anything additional to add in these cases where you're concerned whether or not a student's going to graduate or you're just really, you're pretty sure that they're going to complete this semester, but you're just not sure, please do connect with ISSS because there are options that the student has. We would need to know right away if we think that a student's not going to graduate. Um, and we would work directly with the student on the OPT side. But as long as you have in good confidence, knowing that the student is going to graduate this semester, then you can indicate yes. Um, but if you have any kind of hesitation around that, either you can directly reach out to us or have the student connect with us to determine what are the next steps forward. So, again, if you're confident that the student is graduating, they've made good degree progress, they're a great student, go ahead and say yes. If you have any doubts about that, connect with ISSS because we want to make sure that we're going over all the options that the student has and taking the appropriate measures. Anything else to add for that one, Eric?
Nothing else, good answer.
All right, sounds good. Well, now, like I said, we've talked a lot about F1 students, but you may be working with some J1 students. So I want to share with all of you that we do have a comprehensive amount of information on our website all around J1 student employment. So I would say if you're working with a J1 student, connect them directly with ISSS because they have a lot of information both about on-campus work and off-campus work. So if you are working with a student who is a J1 student, just connect them directly with us and we would love to work with them on any questions that they have. All right. So let's do a quick review. Again, I want to bring it back to the document of the I-20. This for CPT, this is what grants students work authorization. And then for OPT, this is the first of two documents that they need for work authorization. But when a student submits a request through ISSS, what we are doing is going into their I-20 and putting that work authorization onto their I-20. And again, one thing to make just very clear again, I know I've said it, but I just want to make sure it's so clear. It is not your role to know about the I-20. This is again just to provide you context. Okay, so let's dive in. We've got about 20 minutes left. Let's dive into the actual roles that people play in these different requests. We've done a bunch of work on context, but now let's do the actual roles that people have. Starting with the student, we'll move into ISSS, and then we'll finish with the academic advisor, and I'll show you what it actually looks like to receive a request and what questions you'll be answered, or the questions that you'll be asked. Starting off with the student. So the student is really the one who is responsible for pretty much the entire process. They need to, of course, for CPT, find a job, for OPT, find a job in a timely fashion. They are the one who needs to actually apply or request. They need to know about timelines. They need to know about the procedures, everything around applying, as well as the student is responsible for following all of the rules that they have on these various types of work authorization, CPT, OPT, and for J1 as well. So it is on the student to make sure that the student is following the rules and again, relating their work to their degree. They can consult with you as well as consult with any faculty members, but ultimately it is the student who will be making the case for why their work is related to their degree. ISSS's role is to maintain and advertise resources for learning. So students have a wealth of resources. We've got our website that has a bunch of information about CPT and OPT. When a student applies, they're actually required to take an online workshop around CPT and OPT. So students are required to learn the information around these. And we have a variety of other items as well to help students. We do information sessions as well as other live events for students to learn more about CPT, OPT. So ISSS's role is to make sure that students have access to all of the learning that they need to do. The second role that we have is, of course, to approve requests within established timelines. And we do advise students one-on-one for any time that they have a question around work authorization or if they have a concern as well. That's our role, is to help students with everything around work authorization. So if you have any student who is concerned about anything, please do direct them to us because we would love to connect with them on their questions. All right, that's students, that's ISSS. Let's get into the important stuff that you're here for today, which is the academic advisor's role. The role that academic advisors play in this is to review and confirm that the information that the student has provided is correct. So let's take a look at what that actually looks like. So when a student is applying for CPT or OPT, or a variety, if they're looking at others as well, I'll show you where to get more information about like academic questions. But you may have previously received a request from a student where you have received an email from ISSS. This is what on the left side of the screen is what the email will look like. It'll say ISSS and either CPT, OPT, or if you've ever worked with a student on a reduced course load, it would say reduced course load there, and action required. Then there's going to be some piece of information that you need to take from that request and to use to log in. First, it's going to list the client name. So the student that you're working with is going to include their ID number. It's not going to be their full ID number. Don't worry about that. That's not a required field. What is a required field is your login ID. You will get a specific login ID as well as password. Now, this will be evident when you do eventually receive an email around this, but I just want to clarify this is not your regular password. This is a password that is specific to the request that you are receiving. So this is not your regular like X500 password. This is a password that is directly connected to the request that you are receiving. Then you will log in using that information to actually look at the student's request. Once you log in, you are going to see the information that the student has provided and answer a couple of questions. So let's divide out what are the questions that you'll receive when you're processing an application for CPT and OPT. So for CPT, the first thing you're going to confirm is what is their degree level? Did they list it correctly? What is the student's expected date of degree completion? We need to make sure at ISSS that your answer matches the student's answer. You'll be able to confirm that, but you'll be able to confirm that with the student, but please know that part of our process is to make sure that you and the student are agreeing on when the student is expected to complete their program. Is the student's employment directly related to the student's major or field of study? Again, we talked about this before, but if the student, if you don't have the answer, please do connect the student with a faculty member, someone who is in the field, if they have questions about relating it to their major. I have reviewed the CPT request and agree with all the information submitted by the student. Again, their graduation date, their degree level, the degree that they're receiving, etc. So you'll be asked to confirm that. And then I will say this last question, we don't often have people actually fill in information here, but if you have any information that you feel ISSS should know about, this is a really good spot to put that. Again, it's not very often used, but we do leave it there in case you do have any information for us. So there's the questions for CPT. For OPT, it's a little bit shorter. You have, of course, what is their degree level? What is their date of degree completion? Is it accurate? So for the student, an OPT request is going to actually list the date that they are going to complete their degree. It's your role just to make sure that that is correct, and you will confirm that. And then similar, again, not often used, but if you have any additional information or comments, please do feel free to add that into that section. Okay, so this is the part of this is your role in the application, is answering these questions, as well as helping the student if they have any other questions, again, are on the academic side of things. All right, with that, I'm going to, in just a moment, I'm going to turn it back over to question and answer. Before I do that, I actually want to quickly advertise. So today we discussed work authorization, CPT and OPT. But this Thursday, a couple of my colleagues here at ISS will be hosting an introduction to international student advising. They're going to touch again on work authorization, just not quite as in depth as what we're talking about today, as well as talking about other procedures that might be important, or rather, might be good context for you to have as you work with our international students. So if you're interested in that, again, that is happening this February 15th, this Thursday, from 1 p.m. to 3 p.m. So I encourage you, if you have questions maybe around reduced course loads, or you want to know what does it look like for a student actually to arrive here in the US, this session is going to have a lot more information around that, and they'll briefly discuss what we're talking about today, but this is a more holistic view of the international student experience here at the U and all the processes that they pay attention to while they are here. So I wanted to introduce that, but how do we keep the conversation going? Like I said before, ISS is here for you. We are a resource for you, as well as, of course, students. So please do reach out to us. I've screenshotted our contact information here. If you don't know where we are located, we're over here on the West Bank. We're located in the Humphrey School on the first floor. And if you have questions, I encourage you to either call or contact us through email. We do have limited phone advising hours, but if you reach out to us by email, we'll make sure that one of our advisors follows up with you in a timely fashion. So please know that we are here for you. A couple of other resources as well. I've listed out a couple of websites. So today's session is a live session of the work authorization crash course, but my predecessor in this role actually created a video series very similar to topics that we have discussed today. If you would like to see those or reference those, you are welcome to go to this website to access that video series. But like I said before, this session is being recorded and will be sent to you. So um, if you prefer just to watch this video over again, you will be receiving that a little bit later today. Resources that we have for F1 students, we have information on our website about CPT, OPT, STEM OPT, all around the application procedure, everything around that. So please do encourage your students to be referencing our website, and similar for J1 students. All right, with that, we've got about 10 minutes left. So I want to open it up for the question and answer portion.
Lee, there are a couple of questions here. I'll read the first one. I have a few international students who I believe should be on OPT but are not. Are there any cases wherein a student wouldn't take advantage of OPT?
You know what? This is a really good question. And I will say in this specific question, it might be contextual to the student. It might be a little student specific. So I would say if you have a concern about whether or not a student should be using OPT, have the student connect with us. They might be preferring CPT instead of OPT. And again, I guess to hypothesize situations like this, if a student wants to make sure that they have 12 months of OPT after graduation, they might use CPT, of course, during their degree. Um, or if they apply for and are accepted for a whole new type of visa, then they won't be needing OPT. Any other thoughts around that, Eric?
No, I was going to say a similar thing. It's possible that they might have another other type of work authorization, temporary protected status, some statuses that or work authorization that aren't very common, and ones that perhaps academic advisors might be not aware of. It's possible that they could have recently obtained permanent residency and maybe not have shared that, and then they'd no longer be eligible for OPT. So yeah, I just think it's good practice, like you've indicated, just refer students to our office if you have concerns about whether or not they have their appropriate work authorization.
Thank you.
Would you like the second question, Emma?
Let's go ahead and go for the second one.
Does ISSS send an email to international students to be aware of the ISSS procedures for CPT and OPT at the start of every semester?
Yes, excellent question. So the answer is yes. We are in communication with students every single week through our ISSS weekly update. So students are made aware of at the start of every semester about OPT, CPT, as well as timelines. We keep our website up to date with everything around dates that are important. So students do receive communication from us that way. Additionally, students do receive communication for because they are younger than I am and are are very adept at social media. We also do advertise on social media as well for them to be paying attention to the weekly update for important information around CPT and OPT. So, good question. Yes, they are made aware, and that is again why we have so many different really so many different points of contact in this process. Um, when a student applies, they cannot move forward without proving to us that they've taken the workshop to know about these procedures. So we advertise on social media as well as our weekly update. Um, and then we make sure that they've confirmed with us as they apply for these that they are aware about these procedures through taking the workshop. So, good question.
And the next question is, where is the STEM major list posted for students and advisors to be able to view it and confirm eligibility to apply for extended OPT?
Yeah, great question. So, I will say we don't have a list of I will say we don't have a formal list of majors here at the U. Again, that is because CIP codes can change, and we want to make sure that any information that we're sharing is absolutely accurate and up to date. So that's why I think if you have a question around whether or not a degree is eligible for STEM OPT, connect the student with us. If you are interested, I understand that this might be a little confusing to read, but this is the list of STEM eligible majors. I will put this into the chat for anyone who is curious and wants to know more. These are the CIP codes that do qualify for STEM OPT. And again, like I said, um, you will find this. I apologize, I accidentally clicked out of the presentation. Students will find this information on their I-20 on page 1. So just as a refresher, I'll show you where that is. I should not have clicked away from my slides, but that is visible on page 1 of their I-20 under their major. It'll list the name as well as the CIP code for that major. So there is not a list of University of Minnesota specific majors that are STEM eligible. But if you have a question, we are here to answer any questions that you have around that. Um, so I hope that that answers the question. All right, let's check on time. We've only got about a couple minutes left, so I can answer maybe one more question if anyone has got one. If not, I'm going to encourage you again. I want you to connect with us. Like, we are so excited to work with campus partners, and we really want to make sure that we are here for you. So please, as you have questions, connect with ISSS. We would love to be able to help you out with any questions that you have. And again, please know that a lot of this is to provide context and clarify what your role is, but ISSS ultimately is the owner of the information. So please do connect with us for any questions that you have around work authorization. I want to thank you all so much again for joining today. I am going to end this webinar and I will be sharing out the recording once it has uploaded and I'm able to share it out. But thank you again so much for attending today, and I hope that you have a wonderful rest of your Tuesday. Thank you all so much.